Ever get that feeling? Like you're reading your legal notes and suddenly, bam, you're in the middle of a Law& and Order episode.
I know, right?
False imprisonment sounds like a title begging for a dramatic reenactment, doesn't it?
It does. But the thing is, it's not just a law school hypothetical.
Exactly. So we're diving deep into this one, looking beyond the textbook definition to those real-world scenarios. Got some fascinating cases lined up today.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack what makes confinement unlawful and how courts have grappled with these really nuanced situations.
Okay, so quick recap. Most folks have a general idea of what false imprisonment sounds like.
Sure.
But when we talk about it legally, what are the key ingredients that make confinement unlawful?
Yeah, so it's not as simple as just being kept somewhere against your will, right? A lot of it hinges on this idea of unlawful confinement. Let's take a look at this case, Fojtik v. Charter MedCorp. This one really highlights the difference between feeling confined and actual false imprisonment. So you've got a patient in a treatment facility, right? He felt confined, but he was actually free to leave at any time.
Interesting.
The court ended up ruling that just because he felt stuck didn't automatically mean it was false imprisonment, especially since no one was physically stopping him or threatening him.
So it's more nuanced than just your subjective experience in the moment.
Exactly.
But that makes me wonder, what about situations where there are threats involved? Like if someone threatens to harm you to keep you somewhere, does that count as unlawful confinement?
Absolutely. Threats can definitely play a role. It's
Yeah.
about creating that sense of being trapped, even without physical restraint.
Right.
Think about it. Someone threatens to spread horrible rumors about you, damage your reputation, if you leave a store, for example. That psychological pressure, the fear of the consequences, that's a form of confinement, even if the door is wide open.
And the law recognizes that.
It does. And speaking of stores, that whole shopkeeper's dilemma is a prime example of where things get really tricky. You know, suspecting shoplifting, how much leeway do store owners actually have?
Right, because they can't just detain anyone on a hunch.
Exactly. They have what's called shopkeeper's privilege, but there are limitations. Grant v. Stop and Go Market, this case, really digs into this. Basically, for the detention to be legal, the shopkeeper has to have a reasonable belief that the person actually stole something.
Reasonable belief being the key phrase there.
Exactly. And even then, the detention can't be excessive, holding someone for hours on a hunch. Definitely not okay.
That would cross the line into false imprisonment. Makes sense. But here's where I think it gets even more interesting. What happens when it's the police doing the detaining? You've got the Fourth Amendment protecting against unreasonable seizures. How does that all fit in?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And there's this case, Irvin v. City of Shaker Heights, really fascinating. So police arrest a guy based on reasonable suspicion. Now, this isn't the same as having full-blown probable cause, which is usually required for an arrest.
Right.
So the question became, is detaining someone based purely on a hunch, even if it's a police officer's hunch, already stepping on the toes of the Fourth Amendment? Huge debate there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You think about those stories, wrong place, wrong time, detained for hours because you vaguely fit a description. Even if it turns out you did nothing wrong, the emotional toll alone.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings us to another point about damages in false imprisonment cases. It's not always just about lost wages or medical bills. Think about the emotional distress, the humiliation, the damage to your reputation, that sense of your rights being violated.
Right.
The law takes those harms seriously, and juries have awarded some pretty hefty sums in cases like these, recognizing that the impact goes far beyond just the financial.
Wow. So much to unpack here. False imprisonment, it's not as clear-cut as it might seem, is it?
Not at all. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. It really gets you thinking about those everyday encounters, those news stories we see.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you look at things a little differently, doesn't it?
It does. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. This was fascinating.
Anytime. It's important stuff to talk about.